Welcome to the Business Legends Podcast, where we interview business leaders and entrepreneurs so that you can learn from their successes, pump up your own inspiration, and meet the people that make change happen. I'm the host of the show, Russ Sorrells, along with my co-host in the white shirt, Christian Webb. Say good morning. Say what's up.
Good morning.
I am so excited today. Today we have the man, the myth, the legend, the Russ Sorrells, owner and purveyor who has built, bought, and sold 6 businesses and now owns a business called Own Your Category. Russ, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, good morning. Glad to be here.
Yeah, did I mess any of that up?
No.
I'm amazed.
perfect.
I'm amazed. That's why I take that second before the show. Okay,
We still didn't get the tagline, though. He needs to.
No. We're going to get there. We're going to get the tagline. Okay, so for all of our listeners, though, I just want them to know that at some point in this show, I'm going to say the words debauchery and taters, and I'm not going to explain why. You're going to have to tune in later for that. So, Russ, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and give us your tagline because that was amazing.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I have built, bought, and sold 6 businesses in my career. And as far as my tagline, what I'm doing today is I help business leaders and their leadership teams go further, faster by implementing a business operating system called Pinnacle. Mm-hmm. And so business is a challenge, right? There's a lot of chaos, especially in the beginning.
Sure.
There's chaos and complexity that we as owners primarily bring into our businesses. So I work with leadership teams to help simplify and prioritize their business, right? So often we're trying to be all things to all people, when in reality the best thing is to step back, identify what we are good at, and then get better at what we are good at.
What does beginning even mean? Because we're 6 years in, and I still feel like we're at the beginning. So
Yeah.
That's a
14
great
employees later. I mean, it's weird.
Yeah, well, especially the human capital, and just it's always changing. So it is almost as though it's continually beginning. Mm-hmm. But what we do is every 90 days we get together. I get together with my leadership teams, and we begin again, right? So we say, okay, how did we do the last 90 days? What are we going to prioritize for the next 90 days? That's going to help us achieve our goals and objectives for the year, right? So it's get really clear on the plan and then work the plan. And that's what I do with teams, is just hold them accountable to executing.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the Pinnacle system? Is this your system, or can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was founded by Greg Cleary.
Okay.
And essentially Pinnacle, like I said, is a business operating system. So I always describe it as when I'm working with the team, we create the 7-3-1-90 plan.
Okay.
So it's the 7-year Pinnacle, like when we are 7 years out, and we are standing at the top of the pinnacle. What have we achieved? What does it look like? How do we define our success 7 years from today? And then we back that up with 3-year milestones. So we say, what are the milestones that will confirm that we are on track for achieving our 7-year pinnacle? Then we back that up to create a 1-year detailed plan with clear objectives. And then we back that up with a 90-day sprint. So we are essentially working in a 3-month or a quarterly basis to get really clear on what we need to do right now.
And wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, no kidding. I feel like, in certain businesses, and that was actually my next question for Russ too, is I feel like certain businesses, it's not that they can't or won't operate that way, but it seems like, 7 years out seems forever away. I mean, for us, we're 6 years into a business.
It's so funny. You said 90-day sprint. If we planned out 90 days, that would probably be our long plan.
Yeah.
We sat down and did it for several hours.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the challenge that we all face, is because when we have options, then we tend to go down this road a little bit, and we'll go, let's go down this road for a little bit. But the most successful businesses and a lot of the most successful people, they didn't have any options.
Right.
And so they had to choose a path, and they went down that path, and they became amazing at it. And so if we think about the most successful people and most successful businesses that exist on the planet, they didn't do everything. Right? They did one thing, and they did it better than everyone else, and they focused on getting better at it. And then before they knew it, they were amazing, right? So they talk about the Beatles. The Beatles, they were not an overnight success. They spent 10 years in Liverpool. They played how many shows, and then all of a sudden they're an overnight success, bust on the seams, or on the scenes, not the seams.
Right.
And then, oh my, where'd they come from? Well, they came from Liverpool, and show after show after show, and and this dive and that dive and that dive, and before they knew it, they were successful. Amazon started out as
Books,
books, right? I mean, and that's all they did. And they have the tables, and they talked about the tables that were on the sawhorses. They were doors. I think they were doors on sawhorses, right?
Yep.
It were their desks, and so that's their early beginnings. But they stuck with one thing. They focused on what they were good at, and oftentimes How the Mighty Fall is, if you've ever read the book Good to Great. There's another book called How the Mighty Fall. But in Good to Great, they just talk about the flywheel and how the most successful, figure out the flywheel. Like Amazon had a flywheel, and they just continued to work the flywheel in all of their efforts. So if we were to create a 7-3-1-90 plan based on the flywheel, we would focus on the different areas of the flywheel that need the most work for our business. Where do we need to focus on in the next 90 days to accelerate our sales and marketing process, right? What do we need to work on in the next 90 days to help us better execute? So you get really clear on what those objectives are as far as how can we accelerate the flywheel. That's what we want to do. We accelerate the flywheel, and then that continues to grow and expand, and then that allows us the capacity to get into other things, right? So you talk about the new beginning, and when every day is a new beginning, then we often will struggle to get that traction that we need to grow our business.
Is Pinnacle a software that you sell and then leave, or is it a tool you use in consulting?
No, so I'm a leadership team coach or guide, if you will, right? So that is the system that I work with my teams to implement. So when I come in and work with a leadership team, we focus on base camp. So the first 3 months are essentially base camp, where we're creating this 7-3-1-90 plan. And along the way, we're getting really clear on our purpose, because especially today, more than ever, it is critical that we got a clear why. Why do we exist? Because that the people that are working in our organization expect there to be more than just money.
Yeah.
It's got to be about more than just making money. Like how are we making a difference? And when we can have a compelling why in our business, then our people are going to be excited and energized to get out of bed every morning.
For sure.
And so we get really clear on what our why or our purpose is. We get really clear on the talent that we've got, and how do we measure that talent. I would say there are 4 things that when we do these 4 things, we don't need a system, but if we do these 4 things in our business, we are going to be successful. Number 1 is, as leaders, we need to communicate. We got to communicate, right? Here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. And oh, by the way, here's where we're going.
Yep.
Because our team doesn't hear from
taters.
us.
There we go. Here's where we're going, you taters. There we go. Okay, 1.
Yeah.
Got it.
So you guys know where you're going, but does your team know where you're going? Sometimes they probably do, and other times they probably don't, right? So they can't read your mind. They can't read our minds as leaders. So how are we regularly communicating with our team that here's where we're going, here are the expectations, here are the priorities, and just getting granular as far as where we are, where we head as a business. And then I mentioned the clarity of purpose and getting that really clear. And then the third thing that we want to focus on is our playbooks. And we want to make sure that we've got, that's how we consistently deliver value to our clients, right? Is by having a playbook, we work through a process. We find it, we develop a process that's proven, and then we continue to iterate. That's the flywheel thing, right? So we've got a proven process. How are we going to continually grow and improve in that process? And then the 4th thing that we want to focus on are the KPIs. So our teams want to keep score, right? We keep score. So they want to know, are we winning or are we losing? But too often we don't communicate where we are as it relates to the score. I always say, imagine going to a basketball game. You get there in the 3rd quarter and there aren't any scoreboards. You're seeing some great plays, maybe an alley-oop. You've got some fast breaks. It's an amazing experience, but you have no idea who's winning or losing.
Right.
You're going to lose interest and eventually leave. That's what we do to our teams, right? So when we're not keeping score, sharing the score with them, are we winning, are we losing? Then it makes it a challenge to keep people around.
Are you for financial transparency, or do you like to make things that aren't about money to keep score with?
So there's a bit of everything that goes into that. I think that if we as leaders believe that our team doesn't know the numbers or doesn't have some level of understanding, or if we're not sharing with them, they're going to make it up on their own, right? And that's if you own a business, you could be losing $1 million and people still think you're rich.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the nature of humanity and just how people think of business owners. So if you own a business, your team thinks you're rich or thinks that you've got the world right there. But the reality is that you're probably not, right? So you've got those struggles. So helping them understand that, where the business stands and the objectives, that's what we want to do. We want to have some level of, I think that we believe that a level of transparency is good for everyone involved. That now, some of the teams I work with, the leaders choose not to do that. Obviously, these are privately owned businesses, and they can do as they choose. But I encourage people to share, and then get everyone on board with keeping score and knowing what the score is. But it's so on sales. What's the revenue? What are your revenue numbers? What do you have to hit? You got to hit $250K. Okay, that's easy to measure, right? We can. I know if you hit $250,000, we can keep that score. We can identify that. But too often we're not tracking those numbers in a disciplined way, and we will struggle. So communication is key. Our KPIs, having those measures, keeping score is really important, and then holding people accountable. So if we've communicated the expectations, and we've gotten really clear on what winning looks like, now we can hold people accountable. But too often we want to hold people accountable to unwritten expectations.
Yeah, standards that don't exist.
Or unspoken expectations. I always explain it this way: so I'm married, and if my wife expects me to clean out the dishwasher, but doesn't communicate, like we have not had this conversation on setting the expectations for cleaning out the dishwasher, taking out the trash, picking up, cleaning up, taking up laundry, and helping with those things. If we haven't had that conversation, and I don't do those things, then now there are expectations that she has that are not being met. I'm not meeting those expectations that she has. And so now there's going to be a problem, right? She's going to be mad. I'm not going to know why she's mad, right? We didn't talk about what's this?
I said, have you been talking to my wife?
Right. But so we do that with our employees, right? So when we have an expectation is, I hired you for sales, you're not selling. But what have we done to help? What have we done to teach and train and guide and coach them and get clear on the numbers, get clear on the messaging, and set those expectations? And often we haven't. So I like to have my teams gain agreement. Like let's get an agreement as opposed to setting an expectation. So agreements are, we've talked about what the expectations are. Do you agree? If you agree, now all right, let's sign here, or let's move on, because that's how we're going to be measured. So again, it's about communicating and then measuring. Now we've got the ability to hold people accountable and set those, be really clear from an accountability perspective. And then the fourth thing is I always say, hire adults and be adults. And too often we've got this passive aggressive approach, especially in a partnership. It's really challenging. Like, oh my gosh, Reese isn't showing up on time, and Christian is always, oh my gosh, he's always so negative, but that conversation,
You got that opposite, but no, just kidding.
so but that conversation it goes unspoken, and then again over time, it's that little grain of sand that just continues to aggravate, and it festers, and before you know it, it's a full blown, I want to get a divorce. Well, what happened? Everything was going so well. But in reality, we weren't talking about the challenges that we are. So from an adult perspective, we want to have adult conversations in our organizations and have what we call radical candor, which is a great book, by the way. But that's what often is lacking, and we have passive aggressive behavior that doesn't allow us to manage a business. I was just talking to one of my leaders this morning before I came in here, and he's got, it's just drama. It's just drama city in the organization. It's like, what, why? And why do we allow it? Why would we allow the drama to continue to transpire? Let's just sit down. Let's have adult conversation. Hey, this is how we need to show up for each other, for the business. And if this isn't going to work for you to show up in that way, in that manner, then we're going to have to part ways.
Yeah,
we got to set those expectations that this is not going to be tolerated. We should not be beholden to anyone in our organization, no matter if they're the rainmaker or if they know every process in our organization, or if they've been around for 20 years, it doesn't matter. If they're poisoning our culture, then they need to go.
And sometimes one bad apple can spoil the bunch too.
Every time.
Yeah. One thing that I distinctly remember, and I'm very curious to get your opinion on as well, is back when I had the nutrition stores, I hired 2 people separately, but they were girlfriend boyfriend, and my fear before that is that they would bring their relationship trouble into the office or whatever, if given the opportunity. So I sat them both down. I said, look, I'm going to hire her, but here's the deal. He worked for me first. I don't care what's going on with you guys. Number one, I'm not going to tolerate any type of relationship drama happening in the store. Just not going to work. And number two, if things should happen between us and he wants you gone, you got to go, because that's just the way it is. And they both respected it. Luckily, it worked out very well for me, but I set that standard from day one. So speaking of that exact example, do you have any perspective on that type of thing? Hiring couples, hiring people that are maybe husband and wife or related or anything like that?
Well, one of the businesses that I've owned along the way, we had 3 family members in that organization, and one of them had some pretty significant responsibilities in the business. It wasn't working out, and so we had to part ways, and it was a struggle. I mean, there was a lot of tension, understandably so, right? It just didn't work. So trying to maintain the relationships in that situation created some dynamics that I wouldn't wish upon anyone. So I think you did the right thing. You were very clear. You were upfront. You said, okay, here are the expectations. Can we agree? Do you agree? And then you move forward.
Right.
And then when people violate those expectations, don't hold that to be sacred, then you part ways, right? So you don't have to explain yourself at that point, because you already made it clear.
Agreed ahead of time on this stuff.
So it's certainly a challenge. Yeah, having family members, especially if one is a performer and the other's an underperformer, that's where if they're both crushing it, then you're, hey, what a great decision.
Right. Yeah.
I think every hire, it's that way though. It's like,
it is.
when they crush you, we're like, oh yeah, that was brilliant. I mean, that's a good decision.
I'm the man.
And then when they suck, we're like, oh man, wish I'd knew this person, ahead of time. But
so I'm very curious. So you built, bought, and sold 6 businesses, and then now you have this amazing consulting position as well. So how did you determine? And I know life takes crazy paths and things like that, but each business that you had, how did you go from business and ultimately to now what you do? How did you make that transition?
Yeah, so it has been one of the things I want to mention too is I know this is a young entrepreneur podcast, and I have financed all of these businesses in different ways. One of them, my first one was just self-funded. The machine shop that I had was all self-funded. I had done some design work to get some capital, and then I deployed that capital to buy some machines, and then those machines, I bought a house specifically because it had a big garage and 200 amp service.
Oh, wow.
And so the 200 amp service allowed me to put my machine shop in the garage. And so that was a self-funded business. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that the reason I transitioned out of that business is because I had another opportunity. I was an engineer at the time that I owned that machine shop, and my engineering gig was going to take me to Japan to work for a year. And so I sold.
Can't turn that down.
Right. Yeah. So I sold everything at that point. And that didn't work out. So, which was, amazing. I mean, things at the time it sucked, but.
So let me pause you
Sure.
right there very quickly. So that didn't work out. So, looking into that exact moment in your life, how did you get through it? And, as I'm thinking about speaking to upcoming entrepreneurs, how do you tackle challenges and how do you get through things like that? Because I'm sure at the time you had sold your house, you had sold your business, you had sold, your machine that you were speaking about. How did you get through that ultimately?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thankfully, I had mentors. And so I had some mentors that I trusted. One of the guys, his name was Bernie Miller. Or not Bernie Miller. It was, one of the Miller brothers. But Donnie Miller. It was Donnie Miller. Donnie Miller. So Donnie and Bernie are brothers.
Gotcha.
Bernie's a character. But so Donnie owned the beverage center there. So, the Anheuser-Busch distribution facility there in North Vernon, Indiana, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but they were very successful, but grounded. They owned a tire shop as well, and just grounded people. And so Donnie kind of took a liking to me, and I would call him up and ask him for advice. This would change, but that would change. As far as the transitioning and when that fell through, I was certainly disappointed because I was on a path. I had created a vision. I was going to move forward with that vision, and then I became. But what it did was it freed me up. So I was out from under the responsibility in the machine shop because I had transitioned out of that, and from my perspective, I was free to go from Cummins because I wasn't in the role that I had originally started there because they were planning on me going to Japan for a year, right? And so I was kind of in a neutral spot, and I said, man, I want to get into sales. I think sales is probably the best thing for me, and had an opportunity with this leak test company to get into sales, and from there, I moved to Michigan. And as far as that, but I called Donnie, and I said, hey, Donnie, here's the opportunity. Here's what they're going to pay me. Here's how they pay me. And he said, Russ, he said, that sounds like an amazing opportunity. And so I took it, thanks to his advice and guidance there, and it just seemed like a no-brainer, and it completely transformed my life. Plus, I will say that I moved back to my hometown, and my buddies from high school that didn't go to college, they still lived in that hometown, and we had a good time.
Yeah.
And we would have a good time on Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, and during football season, Sunday.
And that's where all the debauchery happened.
Debauchery,
Yes. That's where the debauchery happened.
We got them both. Yes.
And so I realized that I've got to get myself out of this situation, or it's going to be, I'm going down the wrong path based on what I wanted to achieve and accomplish in life.
Isn't it amazing how that experience, and I'm 100% sure you probably still talk to a lot of those guys. They're probably still great friends, and I'm 100% sure that you had great times with them and stuff. But you knew based on where you were at, you kind of had a self-reflective moment and said, this is not where I want to be. I need to change, and I need to do something different. And it sounds like that kind of spurred you on to move to Michigan.
That's right. I moved to Michigan. I didn't know a single human being. As a matter of fact, I moved into this guy's house who was also a salesperson for the company I was starting to work with.
Wow.
He was on vacation. He was down, and so I move in. And I'm living in this dude's house. I've never met him. It's the first time I've ever been to the house. It was such a weird.
I'm sure you procured all the details beforehand. It's not like he just showed like, hey, I'm here now or whatever.
Well, right. So we certainly made arrangement. But I am very much a fly by the seat of my pants kind of person. I just kind of show up sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's
That's
go.
awesome.
So
That's amazing.
But that's how that happened.
Yeah.
As far as that. But as far as the transition, so I decided that I wanted to start my own agency after working in this business. Unfortunately, the boss that I had was not a very nice person, and so I said, "Man, I'm gonna do this on my own. Heck with this."
Was there anything? Sorry, I keep pausing.
Sure, no
story
worries.
here, but was there anything specifically there that kind of made you make that next move? Because it's one thing to say somebody's not nice, but was there a specific event or a specific time? And it's okay if not. I'm just asking if there was something that kind of threw you over the edge, where again you had to make that transition decision.
Yeah, so there wasn't necessarily an impetus other than I wanted to go. So I had talked with a couple of my colleagues. We had sat together and made a plan, and they didn't want to move forward with the plan.
Gotcha.
And I said, hey, I'm going. I'm going to make this happen. Right? I'm not getting any younger. I was 29, I think, at the time when I made that transition. No, maybe I was 30. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Right.
So I said, gosh, I'm not getting any younger. And so I convinced my wife to move down here to the Carolinas. I had a non-compete, which I think I just read they're totally doing away with non-competes. There is no such thing as a non-compete these days.
It hasn't been able to have been held up for a while.
Yeah, there's a couple industries that non-competes hold up that are very specific, and there's reasons for it, such as industry knowledge and stuff like that. But for the most part, they haven't held up in years, from my understanding at least.
Yeah. They just somebody sent me some information that they're passing a law that says they're just you can't enforce them.
I kind of like that though, because speaking of non-competes, if you're not doing your job for employee retention, then chances are that there was a mistake long before that, whether it's the way you treated somebody, the way you compensated somebody, the way that your culture is. There's probably a mistake before that that's convinced them to want to exit us anyways. So I'm a big fan of not having non-competes. We don't have non-competes for our employees at all. So,
Right. Yeah. And so that if there is some intellectual property, obviously you want to protect that. But from I was like, hey, it's a free market.
Right.
That's ultimately what we want to encourage is that free market capitalism, free market approach to it. So I decided to make that change. I moved down to here to the Carolinas. That was in 2004 when we moved down here and started.
What a huge improvement, Michigan to North Carolina, by the way.
Well, I tell you, I Michigan at the time, when you're experiencing something, you're like, oh man. But Northern Michigan, you can't in the summer. In the summer,
okay.
Unbelievable, so beautiful. Golf courses are green. I mean, everything's green. The weather is absolutely perfect, as opposed to obviously summer down here in the Carolinas.
It's like a molten inferno of hell.
Yes. So, but anyway, yeah. So, definitely the right move at the right time. The Carolinas were starting to really expand, and so I moved down here, didn't know a single human being, and started my manufacturer's rep agency. I had saved up about $100,000 from my old job, and that's what I used to fund my startup here. Plus, I got some stipend from the company that I was representing because when I was in Michigan, I happened to be their number one salesperson for many years in a row, and so they wanted to continue to work with me here, and that was encouraging and positive.
That's incredible. So do you attribute any of your success to it sounds like you kind of get a fresh start. You moved to Michigan, didn't know a single person, and then you kind of built yourself up from there. And then you moved to North Carolina, you didn't know a single person other than your wife. But then you kind of built up from there. Can you speak to that if you find that was a piece of your success, or did it just happen that way?
I make sure I have a clear plan. Like before I start anything, I've already got it planned out.
Gotcha.
Like my mentor, his name is Jim Rohn, ROHN, and my dad got me listening to Jim Rohn when I was 9 years old. He's a business philosopher. If you're not listening to Jim Rohn, he's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But so his philosophy,
second to Business Legends podcast, but I'm just kidding.
absolutely,
yeah.
But his philosophy it was essentially ingrained in me. Like I mentioned, my dad got me listening to him when I was 9, only because I would ride around with my parents divorced when I was really young, and my dad moved to Arizona, so we lived in Tucson, Arizona. I grew up in Southern Indiana, and I would fly out to hang out with my dad for the summer. And of course, he couldn't take the whole summer off, so I became his sales pawn. And he would take me on all of his sales calls, and we'd go into a meeting and you get to know people over time, like Rusty, how are you? And so he sold steel and aluminum.
Okay.
And the reason that I wanted to start a machine shop is because I was exposed at an early age to those machine shop owners, and they were amazing. They were so nice, so welcoming. Like, man, that's what I want to do. I want to own a machine shop when I grow up. So I was a tool maker in college and whatnot. But as far as you ask in the startup, but I always have a clear plan. So I have a vision for what it is that I want to achieve, and I have a vision for my life, and I just want to continue to actualize that through. And so when I make a plan, I go and I execute the plan. And the biggest challenge that I've found is that as I diversified, so I had this business and I started buying other businesses because that's what people do, right? You accumulate businesses because that's the right thing to do, other than invest in real estate, which is probably the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But so I invested in these other businesses because I thought that was the smart thing to do. But my intention wasn't to run those businesses. My intention was just to have the passive income that comes from them. But my realization was there is no such thing in my world, right? So had I put someone in place as an operator, that would have been amazing. But I didn't. We tended to go cheap. Like I want to pay somebody as little as possible to run this thing, and of course they would run it into the ground, and then I would have to come in. So my experience here on that is as I have gotten good at something, and then when I diversify, I then have not as much time to invest in that thing that I was really good at. We talk about the flywheel. So I was really good at selling industrial equipment. Like I was really good. I sold $250 million worth of equipment here in the Carolinas over the course of my career. And that generated a lot of commission income, which is fantastic. And I'm grateful for that. And I would, deploy that in different ways. But my success did not beget additional success, right? So had I just continued to focus in and do that, I would have a lot more from a financial perspective than I have today. But I wanted to diversify. I got bored. It became kind of easy. As far as that goes, I knew my people, I knew my customers, I knew my territory, and so
that's where the weird balance is, though, right? Like, is it just a race to more money, or do you want to actually do things that are not absolutely correct so you can break the boredom? I mean, life is only so long. I mean, you got to enjoy it, I guess.
One of the companies I represented, and this hit me many years ago, is they had a goal, and the goal was $100 million. And I was talking to the guy that he was the sales leader for that organization or operations leader, and I said, hey, they were in their goal planning, and I said, what's the goal this year? And he said $100 million. I said, how come? He said, why? What do you mean? I said, well, why $100 million? He said, well, that's the number. I said, why is it the number? And he was like, well, I don't know what to tell you, Russ. It's just it's the number.
Never thought about it before.
Yeah. And so it got me thinking, like, when is enough enough? Like, what is is it just going to be, am I just going to continue to sell until I get to $1 billion? Is $1 billion enough? Is it $2 billion? Like, at what point in time is enough enough? And that's when I really started to think about the idea and concept of significance. So we talk about success, and there's a lot of conversation about going from success to significance, and that significance is beyond just hitting another number. It's like, what impact, what difference can I make? And I think ultimately when we have the opportunity to serve in a way that's meaningful for us, that helps people achieve their full potential, then we are, that's fulfillment. That's significance. That's what we're going for. So that's when I kind of pivoted personally to move away from that focus or obsession on more, to think about, okay, how can I transition to where I'm being more impactful? I am leveraging my skill set to help other people grow and get better and make plans, because that's something that has really helped me, is to the ability to step back, make a clear plan, and then go and execute that plan. And so that's what I get to do now. So it took me, so I decided that I was going to transition out of all those businesses because I wasn't doing anything well. Right.
Doing a whole lot, but nothing well.
Yes, exactly. I was doing a whole lot and I wasn't doing anything well.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to transition out of this and get back to doing only one thing. And so I decided to sell everything. It took me 4.5 years.
Wow.
To transition out of everything. Because obviously you can't just say, okay, see you later.
So then you have the crazy opposite. Like if you watch about 15 podcasts back or something, we had a guest on here, Rich Moyer. Man's a legend. I'll have to introduce you if you want to. But
episode 44.
Yeah, he owns like 7 or 8 businesses and multiple locations of each one of these businesses. And
he's a good friend of ours too.
He works maybe 30 hours a week. He has delegated his operations to the point that he makes profit, and he takes good care of his team. His
team loves him.
He gives them financial advice separately, like at little meetings, talking about how to save and do things. And like his team loves him. The man works 30 hours in total on all 7 businesses.
That's the way to do it. That's not what I did, right? So I was trying to do everything, and I joke with people, and I used to say, people ask me, what do you do, Russ?
What do you do, Russ?
Well, let me tell you, Reese. I own 3 businesses. I own a rep agency.
Make sure to check out the body language on
I
this
own
one.
I own a car wash.
Yeah.
In an oil change facility, and I own a prosthetics and orthotics business. So we've got partners in them. We have a good business. But the reality is, inside I'm such an imposter. I'm totally
imposter syndrome.
I am not doing anything well right now.
Wow.
Reese, but I'm not going to share with you that I'm kind of a disaster at the moment because I'm spread too thin. I'm not doing anything worth the crap. But it was ultimately because I didn't again put operators in that could execute. So he's definitely got the right philosophy. That's what I always tell my leaders is, what we want to do is we want to build a business to be an asset that serves, right? Not a prison in which we serve. And that's often what happens, right? So we have the idea to start a business, and instead of starting a business or having a business or owning a business, we end up with a high-paying job. Ideally, high-paying job.
Right.
Sometimes
low paying.
Sometimes we don't get paid hardly anything at all because of that. But so there are lots of people that have figured that out, and that's systems. So that's why systems are so important. That's why putting our ego in our pocket so that you don't have the let me tell you what I do.
I'm gonna tell you what I do.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Because that type of mentality is what keeps us trapped in mediocrity.
Yeah.
So.
I agree 100%. Well, we're wrapping up here today. Russ, you've been a spectacular guest, man. I feel like we could continue on this podcast for another 17
We might
episodes.
need a
if we
part
want
two,
to.
part
Yeah,
three.
part two. We have had two.
You tell
guests.
all your guests that.
Yeah, no, I don't. We've had two guests. They're both good friends, and I hope you become one as well. That have come back for second episodes. But I think that we could easily do a
To
second.
be
with
fair,
you,
they
sir.
also keep opening things.
Yeah. And that's true. That's true. We had about a three-year separation through COVID and stuff, and the next episode that we had with them was totally different, obviously. But so one thing that I hear you say is having a clear and concise plan with things. And this might be a little bit of a personal question, but can you think of a time that a plan went completely awry and how you responded to that?
Yeah, so the car wash is an excellent example of something that went completely awry. So we bought this perfectly good business, and it was cash flowing $40,000 a month.
Wow.
And so we got an SBA loan for this. It was easily fundable with SBA as well as some owner financing. And so it was a great deal, smoking deal. The cash on cash return was really good in the beginning. But we cut corners. So we had a plan, and it was a beautiful laid out business plan that we put together.
You didn't follow the plan.
Well, we went cheap. I think that was it. So it was we put my God love him up. We put my brother in there. So my older brother Mark, we put him in to have him run the business, and he had never run anything. I mean, we totally set him up for failure at the end of the day, right? So hindsight's always 20/20 on everything in life, right?
Yeah.
But we totally set him up for failure. He had never run or managed anything, and now he had an $800,000 business that he was running that had 20 employees. It had a car wash component. It had an oil change component. It had an inspection component. So I mean, just things were going on all the time. It was and the people were an incredible challenge. Not just the employees, but the customers.
Sure.
Had their challenges because consumers
Always do.
Always do. It's just a reality.
Are a challenge. And so we totally set him up for failure. So when it was all said and done, I lost $500,000 and my partner lost $500,000 in that. So we had a plan, and again, we always step back or I always do a postmortem on anything like
Well
that.
said. Well said. Yeah.
And so the reality was I really got clear on what the mistakes that we had made.
Yeah.
First and foremost, we should have just gone out, found someone in that industry. We had no experience. I mean, I washed my car with a bucket and soap, right?
Right, sure.
And so hindsight being 20/20, we would have gone out, found someone, had them be, from an ownership perspective, maybe giving them 10% of the business and upside on profits, paid them really, really well, 6-figure plus salary, and allowed them to do what they do best in helping that business to grow. But instead, we brought my brother in and paid him $40,000 a year or something like that to work a 7-day-a-week job. I mean, it was just unrealistic expectations.
It's a big tease to want to take on that $40,000 in cash every month when you could have paid somebody great and taken on 10 or 15, but it would have most likely survived.
It would have survived, exactly, absolutely. And it became a death spiral. And I think that was an interesting. I shouldn't say experiment, but I was almost on the outside looking in, watching this happen, because you don't have, as it gets thinner and thinner and thinner, you don't have the cash, and the cash is gone from the business, and so you can't put more money in. You don't want to take more money out of your savings. You already, do I put good money after bad, and and it just becomes this death spiral.
Yeah, once you found the mistake, you're like, oh, well, now I can't fix
Too
it
late to
because I
correct
don't
it.
have any more money coming out of this.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
went from that person to another person to another person to just a series of bad decisions where we were naive. I mean, that's the easiest way I can put it is we were naive to think, because I didn't buy it to wash cars,
Right.
but yet every Saturday, that's where I would be.
Right.
I would be up there washing cars, and which was a great, it's a very humbling experience, a great learning experience at the end of the day. And one of my other lessons is you cannot rationalize with irrational people.
Well said.
Yeah,
Fair.
and so that was I think that was lesson number one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That makes perfect sense.
And man, is it draining when you have to try.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've had to try many times in my life.
Yes, you have.
yeah. Well,
Yes, you
I had this. I was bound and determined to help the employees live a better life, because that's what fulfills me, is helping people to live their full potential, right? So I help people who want to help themselves make plans for their lives so that they can live their full potential, because I believe everyone wants to live their full potential, but they've not been taught how, nor have they been shown the way, right? That's not something that's ever taught. We have to figure this out for ourselves. And I was like, I'm going to help these people. They work at a car wash, for goodness sakes, and let's make a difference for them. So I would literally go up into my office and I would sit down with them, and I had this worksheet that we would work through, and they would be like, oh yeah, and I said, well, okay, what's one thing you would like to do? I'd like to get my GED. Okay, excellent. All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go out and you're going to study and you're going to identify, what are the next steps for you to get your GED, and then we'll pay for it. I will pay for it, for you to do what is necessary so you can get that. Okay, great. Of course, they would, the next week they would quit. It was so
Right.
weird. So another person, if they wanted to get a new car. Excellent. So, what kind of car? What do you need to get? How does this, and what do you need to build up? Okay. All right. Well, let's get clear on that. So we would get clear on that, and they would leave almost every. It was just such an interesting experience to sit down with them, and then have them nodding their head, drinking the Kool-Aid, oh yeah, I want to change my life. I don't want to work at a car wash forever. I want to go out there and really live my full potential. But at the end of the day, they would end up not following through. Not even doing one thing, and they would leave.
Yeah.
They would leave the company. I just thought it was such an interesting experiment in humanity.
Yeah.
And
I have tons of experience in that. A lot of my family members are in the factory world, and you can't get them past it. You'll sit down with them, you'll help them try to build a plan, and they'll just be like, well, I found this job for $15.50 an hour over here. It's so much money. I can't wait to get into it. I'm sure my life will change. And then they start working that, and they're working 50 hours a week, and
stuck
nothing
in
ever
it.
changes. And then they're like, oh, there's one $17 an hour over here. They don't realize that they just went over here and spent 6 months of thinking they could get a $40 an hour job. It's not even a big jump. It's
Right.
just a jump.
Yep.
Yes. And that's what I always teach them. I say, right now you're using these, and eventually these are going to give out on you, right? So now, how do we use this? That's what we want to work on, right? How you're smart. You can figure this out. What is it? What value can you deliver beyond just using your hands? Or how can you use your hands better, smarter? How can you become a supervisor, manager? How do you elevate yourself? So I would always say, my goal is for you to work yourself out of a job here.
Yeah.
Because you're going to hit a limit, right? We can only pay
Yeah.
you so much to work at a car wash. But what if you grow yourself out, and the people that were cleaning their cars, they own businesses. They see you hustling. They see what you're doing every day. How about you you bring it every day? And I had one story. I had a young man come up, and he just gotten out of jail. And again, determined to help him. Again, he was drinking the Kool-Aid. He's like, yes, he's 19 years old, and he just had a baby with his girlfriend, his baby mama, had just had a baby. And so he we talked, made the plan again, drinking the Kool-Aid, shaking, the head shaking up and down, and then the next thing I know, he's gone. And but our facility was broken into. And I didn't draw any connection between this, right? But I would take him upstairs, and that's where the safe was upstairs. And so we couldn't figure out. We had cameras everywhere, but it really wasn't. It was easy to get with a hoodie and whatnot. You could totally the cameras didn't mean anything
Right.
at that point, because you couldn't get any facial identification and whatnot. So we just chalked it up. Hey, we're never going to figure out who broke in. And about 4 weeks later, we get a phone call. Parole officer calls me and says, "Hey, is there any reason that Jamarian would have been at your facility like on such and such morning at 1:30 a.m. in the morning?" Like, huh.
I can think of one reason.
Well, as a matter of fact, there isn't a reason that he would be there, but he was there, and this is what happened. So he had an ankle bracelet on because, as I mentioned, he'd just gotten out of prison. But just think of
He went to a facility to break into it with an ankle
With
bracelet,
an ankle
on,
bracelet
with
on.
GPS.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
And so I think there's obviously I joke about it a little bit. And you think about the dumb criminal. I think there's a whole thing on that. But think about what he was going through. I just can't imagine the rationale and what his life has been like, that he's had to make decisions on I'm going to go break into this place, even though I've got this ankle bracelet on. I've got all of these things going on in my life. I've got a new baby, and if I get caught, I'm going to go to jail for that much longer.
He's probably
and
doing it to pay his rent.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, it's humbling to think about that. We're not in that situation, right? We don't have to do that, and we can't process like why. Yeah,
what leads to these decisions?
What were you thinking? Like why would you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And had one of our guys was going to go to prison, or go to jail.
Yeah.
And he was like, Mr. Russ. He always called me Mr. Russ, and I said, Mr. Russ, I've just been violating my parole and haven't been checking in with my parole officer, and I got to go back to jail. And so he said, what should I do? And so I gave him Tony Robbins' Unleash the Giant Within.
Read that.
And I gave him a journal, and I said, Jamarian, actually it's different, but
it doesn't matter.
Regardless of what his name was.
Mm-hmm.
I said, just take this and journal. And so he was in it for 3 months. He went in and served his 3 months, and he came back, and he was like, that was a transformational time for him to be able to reflect and to read the book and to think about it and journal about it. It really was made a difference for him. So there is those opportunities that we have to make an impact that we sometimes don't even know that we are making an impact, but trying to just plant seeds of future
Hope
greatness
in
and growth.
people.
Hope.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
It's always very humbling when a lot of times we're not consciously aware of the effect that we have on other people, and then on down the road somebody might give you some recognition for something that might have just been like a fly-by-night comment. So, well, Russ, thank you so much for joining us today. This is usually where we ask a funny question. I stall for time because I don't know any funny questions.
I don't have any, but I know I'll be exploring the Pinnacle website later this
Yeah.
evening. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, go to ownyourcategory.com.
Ownyourcategory.com.
I'm launching. I'm transitioning. I've got my one-on-one practice is almost full. I've got only 2 slots left there, but I'm launching a cohort program that where I work with multiple leaders at the same time to go through the implementation of Pinnacle. So it allows me to be more impactful to more businesses, and obviously it's a more cost-effective strategy for people that can't afford the one-on-one
With
as well.
the power of Zoom.
Power of Zoom.
Exactly. The power of Zoom. I prefer to do it face-to-face, right? So if they're I'd love to get more local folks, but it's certainly we do it Zoom, and we will be getting together even as a cohort. If we're on Zoom, we will still get together once a year for a 2-day annual that we will all meet and greet and work through our plans together. So
Yeah. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much. You've been great.
appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks.